The trade war between the US and Canada isn't just headlines anymore, it's hitting American wallets, jobs, and entire industries. While politicians debate tariffs in Washington, 6 US states are already feeling the economic squeeze from escalating trade tensions with our northern neighbor. If you live in one of these states, or know someone who does, you need to understand what's coming next. What's up, everyone? Trade wars don't just happen in boardrooms, they destroy real communities, real jobs, and real families. Today we're breaking down the 6 US states most vulnerable to the current Canada-US trade conflict. Some of these might surprise you, but the economic data doesn't lie. And if you want to stay ahead of the economic trends that actually matter, hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. So what exactly is happening between the US and Canada right now? 3 major developments are reshaping North American trade. First, Canada recently passed Bill C-202, which permanently protects their dairy supply management system from future trade negotiations. This essentially locks US dairy farmers out of the Canadian market for the foreseeable future. Second, President Trump has threatened comprehensive tariffs on Canadian goods, with some sectors facing up to 25% duties. Canada has already begun preparing retaliatory measures. Third, ongoing disputes over energy exports, particularly electricity and natural gas, are creating uncertainty in markets that depend on stable cross-border energy flows. These aren't just political moves, they're already disrupting supply chains, raising costs, and threatening industries that have relied on seamless Canada-US trade for decades. The impact isn't hitting every state equally. Some are more exposed, more vulnerable, and what's happening to them could spread nationwide. New York's vulnerability might surprise you, but it's all about energy dependence. The state imports roughly 20% of its electricity from Canada, primarily hydroelectric power from Quebec. As trade tensions escalate, Ontario's Premier Doug Ford has already threatened to impose surcharges on electricity exported to certain US states. For New York, this means potentially massive energy cost increases just as the state is trying to transition to renewable energy. Higher electricity costs hit everything from manufacturing to data centers, and New York's already struggling with some of the highest energy costs in the nation. The ripple effects go beyond just higher utility bills. Energy-intensive industries in upstate New York could become uncompetitive, and the state's ambitious climate goals become much harder to achieve when clean Canadian hydropower gets more expensive. Minnesota's economy depends heavily on Canadian inputs, particularly in agriculture and energy. The state imports significant amounts of Canadian fertilizer, especially potash, which is crucial for crop production. Trade disruptions and tariffs are already driving up fertilizer costs by double-digit percentages. But it's not just farming. Minnesota's brutal winters require massive amounts of heating fuel, much of which comes from Canada. As cross-border energy trade becomes more expensive and uncertain, heating costs are rising for homes, businesses, and institutions across the state. This creates a perfect storm for Minnesota's agricultural sector. Higher input costs for fertilizer and fuel, combined with limited export opportunities as trade relations deteriorate. Rural communities that depend on farming are feeling the squeeze first, but the effects are spreading to the Twin Cities metro area too. Wisconsin calls itself America's dairyland for good reason. It's the nation's top cheese producer and a major milk exporter. But Canada's new supply management protections are devastating for Wisconsin dairy farmers. The recently passed Bill C-202 essentially codifies Canada's quota system, which heavily restricts dairy imports. For Wisconsin farmers who have historically exported significant amounts of milk and cheese to Canada, this is catastrophic. Some producers have already lost major contracts with Canadian buyers. The problem isn't just lost sales, it's oversupply. When Wisconsin dairy can't reach Canadian markets, it floods the domestic market, driving down prices for everyone. Small family farms are getting crushed between rising costs and falling milk prices. Wisconsin's rural economy depends on these dairy operations. When farms fail, it's not just the farmers who suffer, it's the truckers, the feed suppliers, the equipment dealers, and entire small towns built around agriculture. Florida's vulnerability is all about tourism, and the numbers are staggering. In a typical year, over 3 million Canadians visit Florida, spending billions of dollars on hotels, restaurants, theme parks, and vacation rentals. They're not just tourists, they're economic lifelines for entire communities. But as trade tensions escalate, Canadian consumer sentiment toward US travel is shifting. Early booking data for winter 2025 shows significant declines in Canadian visitors to Florida. This isn't just about official policy, it's about how trade wars affect consumer behavior and confidence. The impact goes beyond hotels and restaurants. Florida's real estate market depends heavily on Canadian buyers, particularly for vacation homes and investment properties. If Canadian demand drops, it could trigger a correction in Florida's already volatile real estate market. Cities like Naples, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami that cater specifically to Canadian snowbirds are already reporting noticeable drops in reservations and property inquiries. Ohio's manufacturing sector is deeply integrated with Canada, particularly in automotive and steel production. The state's factories depend on Canadian raw materials, parts, and components that flow across the border daily. Recent tariff threats and retaliatory measures are already disrupting these supply chains. When Canadian steel and aluminum become more expensive, Ohio manufacturers face higher costs. When deliveries are delayed due to trade disputes, production lines slow down or stop entirely. The automotive sector is particularly vulnerable. Ohio's auto plants are part of integrated North American supply chains where parts cross the border multiple times during production. Trade barriers don't just increase costs, they can shut down entire assembly lines. Cities like Toledo, Cleveland, and Dayton that built their economies around heavy manufacturing are seeing the effects first. When factories cut shifts or delay investments, the entire local economy suffers. If any state embodies the U.S.-Canada economic relationship, it's Michigan. Over 25% of Michigan's total exports go to Canada, an extraordinary level of dependence for any state. The auto industry is Michigan's lifeblood, and it's completely integrated with Canadian operations. Major automakers like Ford, GM, and Stellantis have facilities on both sides of the border, with parts and vehicles crossing constantly. Current trade tensions are creating unprecedented uncertainty for Michigan manufacturers. Supply chain disruptions, tariff threats, and regulatory changes are forcing companies to reconsider their entire North American strategies. The Ambassador Bridge connecting Detroit to Windsor is one of the busiest commercial crossings in North America. When trade relations deteriorate, Michigan feels it first and hardest. Auto plants are already adjusting production schedules, and some are postponing major investments. For a state still recovering from previous economic downturns, this trade uncertainty couldn't come at a worse time. What makes these states so vulnerable? 3 factors. States that share borders or are close to Canada have developed economic relationships based on easy cross-border trade. When that gets disrupted, they have fewer alternatives. States that depend heavily on specific industries, like Michigan with autos or Wisconsin with dairy, are more vulnerable when those sectors face trade barriers. States that import significant amounts of Canadian energy face immediate cost increases when trade relations deteriorate. The irony is that these vulnerabilities exist because U.S.-Canada trade has been so successful for so long. These states built their economies around the assumption that cross-border trade would remain stable and predictable. This isn't just about trade policy, it's about the future of North American integration. For decades, the U.S. and Canada have built one of the world's most integrated economies. Supply chains, energy systems, and even communities span the border. Trade wars threaten to unravel this integration, but the costs aren't equally distributed. Some states and communities will bear a disproportionate burden, while others remain relatively insulated. The political implications are significant too. These vulnerable states include key swing states in presidential elections. Economic pain from trade disruptions could influence voting patterns and policy priorities for years to come. The U.S.-Canada trade relationship affects millions of jobs and trillions of dollars in economic activity. While politicians debate tariffs and trade policies, real communities are already feeling the impact. Understanding which states are most vulnerable helps us prepare for what's coming next. Whether you're an investor, a job seeker, or just someone trying to understand the economy, these trade tensions will shape opportunities and challenges for years to come. What do you think? Are you seeing these effects in your state or community? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to stay ahead of economic trends that actually matter, subscribe for more analysis like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore how these trade tensions might reshape the entire North American economy.